Press, I welcome you all to today's session. Before we begin, few instructions. Please keep your microphone and video mode turned off. This will help you to have a seamless experience during the webinar. We have parked a separate question and answer session towards the end, so you may post your questions on the chat. We'll take it up during the question and answer session. Please note, while you post your questions, the chat setting has to be set to everyone and not private. Now, let me take the privilege to introduce our trainer for today, Mrs. Devyani Kapoor. I welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you, NK. It's an honor to be part of this forum.
That's great, ma'am. So, Mrs. Devyani Kapoor is an educator, an author, a trainer, a resource person, and an ardent social worker. She carries a rich experience of 25 years in the education industry. She has worked with some of the renowned names in the education sector, DAV School, Amity, Educom Solution, to name a few. An alumni of Queen's Mary and St. Stephen College, Delhi, Mrs. Kapoor is an expert in humanities and English language teaching. Her research in education has led to many breakthroughs and innovation. Her innovation in QCT, Quality Circle Time, and participative pedagogy are her main contribution. Since 2008, Mrs. Kapoor has been conducting various capacity building workshops for teachers in areas of humanities, stress management, motivation, and other generic areas of academics. She has conducted more than 100 capacity building workshops to empower educators, transform their roles from a teacher to facilitator and mentors in teaching and learning process. She is currently head of academics, research and development at Skilltree Consortium. With that, I invite Devyani ma'am to take the presentation ahead.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this workshop on effective strategies of teaching prose and poetry. But before I delve into the issue and take up the teaching strategy, the effective teaching strategies of prose and poetry, I just want to very quickly go through some of the aspects which are pressing issues. For example, what is the aim? Why do we, after all, we are Hindi speaking, most of 50% is the Hindi speaking nation, but why is the need for a second language? Why is the need to delve into something known as English? The reason behind this is primarily to empower our children to effectively communicate. Effective communication in any language is the need of the hour. Also, English being the global language, English also happens to be the official language of the country. We see that it is important that in the 21st century, where the need is a global need, the right kind of communication, the right kind of grip on the language is very important. That is the practical reason. But the more important reason is to develop in our students a flair, a passion for any language, may it be Hindi or maybe Bengali or Spanish or French or English. However, another issue that we witness constantly as educators is that we have observed that students across somehow are divided into three categories. There is the 10% students who are very passionate about studying English, attending the English classes, because they have a passion towards understanding of a language. The second category, whom I call the social media generation, is students who feel that who are competent in spoken English. However, they do make grammatical mistakes, but because they have developed a culture, a peer group, they have developed an exposure to pick up the English, so they feel that they know English, and for them English is means of some kind of communication, and probably uh, they feel that they would be able to pass the exam. That is one of their main reasons. It is the third category, which is the pain area for us, which is the students who at times who come from tier 2, tier 3 cities, who have the X factor, who have the ability, but because of effective communication, they are unable to exhibit their qualities, their potential. Let us look at some of the reasons for this. One important reason is that yes, English is not the mother language, mother tongue, and so it doesn't come if effortlessly to you. You have to make an effort. The second is maybe the curriculum. As school, as educators, as policymakers, we see under academic rigor, we are all in a rut of completion of syllabus. And somewhere in that rigor, we at times as educators lose our students' connect with the language. Of course, there is another reason, which is exam. As it is, it being a foreign language. The other thing is that it not being your mother tongue, you have to undertake an exam. So the fear of exam does affect this trend. Also, in many areas, I've seen that English is not encouraged. Spoken English is not encouraged. Very important tip for all the educators is please encourage spoken English. Let your corridors resound with spoken English. Don't just let English be restricted to those 30 minutes if you want really inculcate English. Moving on to now, let's begin. Let us look at prose. Prose is meant for learning a language. Teaching prose means teaching reading with comprehension. The learners are taught the skill of reading. The next step is to teach them reading with comprehension. Reading with comprehension helps the learners to acquire new vocabulary and content words. The power of comprehension can be promoted through reading and listening. When I look at prose, there are a number of categories. For example, you have newspaper clips, you have diary entries, you have novels, you have essays, so on and so forth. What then is the problem? The thing is that when you're teaching prose, prose is something which helps you connect with realities of life in the fiction, non-fiction, but it helps an individual connect with the immediate society. It helps him develop an expression. So obviously, the aims of teaching prose then becomes literary and content. When I say literary, I mean you need to focus on the vocabulary, the fluency, the grammar. It's very important. But when you're taking an English class, you don't need to often segregate your English grammar class and literature class. You need to intertwine both the classes. Literary is at the time of reading your prose, when the prose is being taught, it becomes very important that the teacher takes the lead. The teacher takes the student into the entire realm of that plot in which the prose is set in. It also, the content part is the more you read, the richer you grow. So definitely it expands your knowledge, it expands your understanding of your society, your environment, and it also then makes you a, a person, a student who will be able to comprehend other subjects much better. Looking at some of the common types of prose which are dealt in uh, primary and middle school are, as I said, story, essay, biography, play. So a story then, the teacher, it's very important when you're teaching, you need to stress upon the character, the type of the prose, and also then relate your students with similar aspects. So, for example, if you're taking up a story, it becomes important for you to tell the characteristics of the story. There is no harm in taking 2 minutes out from your class and ask them to narrate, even if it means narrating what happened yesterday. How What did you speak to your mother? How was your day? Maybe you could just begin your session by asking them, let's just do a diary entry, or maybe you write a small story. Expression is the underlying theme of any language. So when I talk about story, the learners learn a few facts through the story to teach morals, mold one's character, and exposure to the style of story writing. Human beings by nature are story, they love us because humanity is all about story. So human beings have an inclination towards story. The moment you talk about a story, the child immediately gets connected. The next is an essay. Again, you have to, as an educator, it becomes very important for you to explain the different genres, different aspects, categories of a prose. When you talk about an essay, it's important that students learn. They have to search for facts, they have to collate the facts, the student makes a curious, the essays make him curious about subjects of the essay, exposure to the style of essay writing, and and he gets to know how to arrange, how to collect his thoughts, how to harmonize his thoughts, how to put them in a sequential order. Similarly, biography in prose becomes very one of or the other. Every year we have biography, one lesson on biography, because biography is a very motivating aspect of prose. There is a lot of character building. There is a lot of, motivation which can be given to the students, because it is all about vicarious learning. It is during these impressionable years when the student can build up his character, he loves to look upon people who have a level of achievement in the realm of life. Another aspect of play. Again, I would recommend strongly to all the teachers that play, when you take up a genre, you have to be very specific and you have to flow with the genre. Do not be in a rut. Do not be in a rush to finish your syllabus. Because, for example, a play would bring out emotions in your students. A play, it is recommended that instead of reading a play, a script in the class, it is recommended to teachers to please let the students enact the play. Give them the time, talk to them, encourage them to write script, encourage them to enact, make small groups, and you don't have to do a lot of planning in them. You may instantly ask the students to divide your students into various groups and ask them to write a small script. I am telling you, teachers, it is very, very possible in a 35 to 40-minute class if you are little organized the previous day. This will give life to your class. It will bring a positive energy in your class, and it will make your class very, very engaging. So I strongly recommend, please don't just read play in your class. Again, some of the steps which I have been dealing through, steps involved in teaching of prose, is that introduction of the prose by the teacher becomes extremely important, because when you introduce it, a lot of burden lies on the shoulders of the teacher. It's extremely important to develop the interest, motivate the students, let your student look forward to what you're going to teach. Set the tone by posing questions, by maybe bringing an object to the class, or maybe trigger their emotions by showing them a clipping, or taking them back into down the memory lane. Let them relate to their previous experiences. So it becomes very important when you reading a text. Teaching structures, I've already dealt with you. Teaching structures is making them aware of the highlight elements of the prose, and what is its genre, what are the elements, what is the plot of the whole story, or the writing. So also, teachers, it becomes very important, please do not read the whole chapter in one go. Do not let the students stand and ask them to read instantly. First is make your students get connected. And how you will do is by relating them from near to far, from known to unknown. The biggest things that are being taught have some kind of relation with their personal lives. Also, then it's very essential you divide the text into smaller units. And dividing this text into smaller units gives the student that much needed time to absorb the difficult words, the newer vocabulary, and to take time to understand the context of the prose. Also, it is another important aspect. Of course, I'm very sure all of you would be making them underline and highlight under the new words. Why I'm using the term new words, one important recommendation to all of you is, please do not use the term difficult. There is nothing difficult, because the moment you say, let's underline the difficult words, you have already set the tone in students' mind that it is a very, very difficult thing that he's trying to, a difficult experience that he's trying to undertake. There is nothing difficult. There is something unknown and new. So please, it's a recommendation when you're doing vocabulary, I would recommend that please change your terminology to new words or wow words, or maybe any term that your students would like to. Also, another tip to use the vocabulary is the new words can be used as, this would be recommended for the elementary school teachers. Please use them as cue words. As I say, that for a week, you may use a new word as a password of the class, or probably the entry. So for example, instead of, if you're teaching a word like rendezvous, or you may ask your students, instead of taking permission from you, may I come in? So they may say, rendezvous, ma'am. The students feel nice, and there is some kind of, break of monotony. Of course, the teacher, there is a small tip for the teacher, that when the teacher reads the prose, you have to be extremely careful. I know teachers, nobody has a better knowledge than teachers, and teachers are, because you are role models of your students. I actually remember in my teaching experience, when I used to teach, I got to know that every year I would get to know that there were some students who would mimic and copy my, mimic me. And when I asked, so during one of the substitution periods, the ma'am, she mimics you very well. And then she said, ma'am, I love in the way you teach. You are so expressive. So I just want to, one day when I grow up, I want to speak like you. I want to become. So that is why I practice. And these people think that but even if they mimic you, you are their role model. That is important, that, a teacher cannot go wrong on pronunciation. The teacher cannot go wrong on the meanings of the words, phrases. So a suggestion is, when you teach, please have a lot of voice modulation in your teaching. Please be very expressive, and just don't read the lesson in one go, or probably create your voice modulation. And for that, it's important that you need to be little prepared, rehearse your lesson. I mean, I still do. When I have to come and take a workshop, I always do a run through, even if I have text written in front of me, because everything is there in front. But how you connect to your audience is by your expression, and any language is all about expression. Yes, moving on to silent reading by the students. Silent reading, again, is something that you would be encouraging. Then there are the testing comments. So these are the various steps which I'm sure you all are undertaking. Moving on to something which is very, very important, and for 21st century pedagogical skills, is one of the very important 21st century pedagogical skills, that is LSRW, activity-based learning, is the new ladder approach. Now, initially, when we were in the heydays of our teaching, and I had started teaching, I remember parents coming, ma'am, the child does not write. The child is unable to read. So that there has been a whole paradigm shift. And I think each and every English teacher should be completely, immersed in the concept of LSRW of English language, while ensuring focus on all these 4 skills, provides you people with a platform for the learners to hone their proficiency in this language. An ideal program for teaching learning of English as a second language would involve content for all the above 4 skills. So whether you're teaching poetry, whether you're teaching prose, or whatever you're teaching, you must incorporate these 4 skills in your teaching. In every lesson, at least 2 skills, I mean, all 4 skills actually should be a part of your lesson. Yet, it is observed that somehow the reading and writing, as I've told you, the reading and writing used to take a front seat. But if you stop and just think for a while, who taught us our mother tongue? Nobody. And we all are so proficient in our mother tongue, and we are amazing when it comes to expressing. And that is because our first interaction as a child with the language was only by listening and speaking. It's very important aspect, teachers, that you have to go back and see that, and go back to the psychology of a child. The moment the child comes into the elementary school, there is so much of emphasis on reading and writing, only because it exhibits. Why? Because teacher is very happy that, yes, I have a tangible proof that, look, my child is reading and writing. The parent is happy because, yes, he knows that, oh, he is getting for what he's sending. But no, I think it should always start with listening, speaking, reading, and writing. I will take you through to just a small activity of listening skills, which is very important. And can we please hear the listening, the audio?
Sure, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you.
At exam time, it is important to sleep well. Today, we have Dr. Baker with us in the studio, and he is going to give us 5 top tips for getting a good night's sleep. Welcome to the show, Dr. Baker.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Let's start with tip 1. Don't go to bed with the television on. Some people think they can sleep well with the TV on, but the noise and the lights mean you don't really sleep well. So turn it off. Tip 2. Don't think too much before bedtime. Do your hardest homework earlier in the evening. Do easier homework later. If your brain is too busy and full of ideas, it takes longer to get to sleep. Tip 3. Don't play video games for an hour before you go to sleep. They also make your brain too busy and active. Tip 4. Turn off your cell phone when you go to bed. What is so important that it can't wait until the morning? If possible, leave your phone in another room. Tip 5. Play music if you like, but don't play too loud. Turn the sound down low.
Thank you, Doctor. That is very useful advice for our young listeners.
Thank you, Kate, for playing. After this, the teachers, you can create a worksheet like this. It will break the monotony in your class. It will hone the students' listening skills, and they will naturally pick up a language by their own. So this is a kind of a small worksheet. Don't do a detailed worksheet at all. Just do a very small. And actually, this is something, because in this times of lockdown, when we are unable to be physically connected with our students, it becomes so important that you do such activities to make your classrooms interactive, and to ensure that students remain connected. Every day brings something new on the portal on the platter to your students. Also, you need to understand all 4 skills are interlinked. They have to be followed in a sequential order, and negligence of any skill will damage the learning process. This method is learner-centered, and it focuses all 4 types of skills. Also, it makes the teacher play a role of a facilitator. There is a big change in the term from teacher to facilitator, because the whole connotation, the whole way of looking at the progressive education is different. Nothing can be taught. Man is a learner, human being is a learner, and he learns effortlessly. So you just need to expose the student to the right kind of, the right kind of things. You need to show him, you need to make your students interested. Okay, another type of this was the listening skills. Again, along with that, you need to make your classes a little more interactive. You can create these kinds of small excerpts like comprehension passages. I will read. When I was a kid, this passage, Becoming, is from Michelle Obama's autobiography. When I was a kid, my aspirations were simple. I wanted a dog.
I think we have lost her. Please wait for 5 minutes. We'll be back.
I am from the south side of Chicago. That tells you as much about me as you need to know. It was a typical working class community. Some good music, some good barbecue, some good times. She's just a girl and she won't find. So little of who I am happened in those 8 years. So much more of who I was happened before. In high school, your guidance counselor didn't see in you what you thought of herself. Yeah. She decided I was reaching too high. How did you, as a Black woman, persevere? We can't afford to wait for the world to be equal to start feeling seen. I feel like I gotta share with you all that the energy that's out there is much better than what we see. How's everybody doing? This girl is on fire. As my mother would say, Michelle and Barack Obama aren't special. There are millions of Michelle and Barack Obamas all over the world. If we can open up a little bit more to each other and share our stories, that's what breaks down barriers. Wow.
Fierce girl who realizes that
Ankesh, the voice is cracking. It's not clear. Ankesh, the voice is cracking.
This is totally me, unplugged. Of Chicago. That tells you as much about me as you need to know. It was a typical working class community. Some good music, some good barbecue, some good times. She's just a girl and she won't find. So little of who I am happened in those 8 years. So much more of who I was happened before. high school. Your guidance counselor didn't see in you what you saw in yourself.
Yeah. She decided I was
Ankesh,
reaching too
I
high.
think
Yeah, ma'am.
How did you, as a Black woman, persevere? We can't afford to wait for the world to be equal to start feeling seen.
I feel like I got to share with you all that the energy that's out there is much
Do
better
you want
than
me to
what
pause?
As my mother would say,
Michelle and Barack Obama aren't special. There are millions of Michelle and Barack Obamas all over the world.
if we can open up a little bit more to each other and share our stories, that's what breaks down barriers. Wow.
Fierce girl who realizes that I have the power to change the world.
This is totally me, unplugged for the first time.
Was it audible? Hello, Devyani ma'am, was it audible?
yes, it was. It wasn't audible to me. I thought that is it my connection or is it the connection for all of them? But it wasn't audible at all.
Okay, so some people are saying yes, some people are saying it's not clear. So I think there would be an internet issue at the other end.
Yes. So for me, it was an internet issue, but I can take it up from here. This is a very motivating and highly motivating autobiography by Michelle Obama. Let's look at this passage. When I was a kid, my aspirations were simple. I wanted a dog. I wanted a house that had stairs in it, 2 floors for
Ma'am,
one family.
I'm sorry, ma'am. You need to share your screen again.
Okay.
Yes, now it's visible.
Can I start?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Because I loved being around little, I wanted to be a pediatrician. Why? Because I loved being around little kids. And I quickly learned that it was a pleasing answer for adults to hear. Oh, a doctor, what a good choice. In those days, I wore pigtails and bossed my older brother around and managed always and no matter what to get A's at school. I was ambitious, though I didn't know exactly what I was shooting for. Now I think it's one of the most useless to be when you grow up, and as if growing up is finite, as if at some point, so for my
Ma'am, there
hospital
is,
and the
ma'am, there is a voice issue. Hello. Hello, ma'am. Devyani ma'am, there was a voice issue.
all right, I think it was the connectivity.
Ma'am, I think if I turn off your video, your voice would be much clearer.
Yes, please do. It's fine. Please. It's
Okay.
perfectly fine.
Yeah, now it's better, ma'am. Please.
Then let's let's just do it without it. I think I have managed to strike a bond with the viewers. So let's just do without the video. And the sad thing is, it's such a beautiful passage, and the internet connectivity has completely killed it. I've been a working class Black student at a fancy, mostly white college. I've been the only woman, the only African American in all sorts of rooms. I've been a bride, a stressed out new mother, a daughter torn by grief, and until recently, I was the First Lady of the United States of America. A job that's not officially a job, but that nonetheless has given me a platform like nothing I could have imagined. It challenged me, humbled me, lifted me up, and shrank me down, sometimes all at once. I'm just beginning to process what took place over these last years. From the moment in 2006, when my husband first started talking about running for president, to the cold morning this winter when I climbed into a limo with Melania Trump, accompanying her to her husband's inauguration. It's been quite a ride. So teachers, if we look at this passage closely, it raises so many questions. It gives us so many insights. There is so much that you can discuss with your students. Their aspirations as young children, to their choices that they make. I always used to hear and always believe the choices that we make today are the way our life would shape tomorrow. But is it important that we need to make that particular choice a very, very tangible choice? So you need to, it is so motivating. You need to tell your student to, there can be a little of value education attached to this very motivational passage. Now, there's a small activity. If you could just take 2-3 minutes. I know the time has already exceeded and we are still, so this is an activity. You could just take a screen or just take a screenshot and try, give an appropriate alternate title to the excerpt. I would love to just, the first part of the activity, I would love all the English teachers to please try and give an alternative title to the excerpt given above. You may leave the second one, but please put in your chats an alternate title. That would be really appreciable. Angesh, have we managed to get some responses in the chat? So if I look at the chat, reflection, willing to rise, my incredible ride, beautiful, excellent reflection, my aspiration. A lot of people have written, life can't be simple, me. One life, one aspiration. Beautiful titles, excellent. Thank you so much, really appreciate. Also, you can have activities, picture compositions. This is something that, of course, you people keep having, but I encourage you to have them as much. Another important thing that I want to draw your attention is to supplementary reader. See, your supplementary reader has a lot in it. And so a supplementary reader is not just for a tool to build your students' vocabulary, fluency. It also has a lot of character building in it. And some of the things which you may take is introduce the passage shortly, whatever the lesson is. introduced to create interest among the students. I think we've already done these points above. Moving on to something which is very close to my heart, and I'm sure to every English teacher, poetry is something, because you be an English teacher because you have a flair for language, and poetry is the soul of any language. In William Wordsworth's words, poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. I'm sure these sound very heavy words, but to the student, but this is something which every student should understand. I would suggest, of course, I'm sure, and I would recommend that you must know by the time the student comes to the middle school, he's very set with the idea that is he passionate about poetry? Does he like it? Does he find it very heavy? It's too hard. There is no story, and so on and so forth. There are so many ifs. I'm sure most students shirk doing poetry. It's only because probably they've not been led into the poetry, the correct way of understanding poetry. It becomes very important, educate teachers, to tell them the structure of the poetry, and even if it means every year, at least from class 5, 6 onwards, I would recommend that every year the teachers should take the students through the various structures of the poetry, the measure, the lines, the rhymes, the stanzas, the melodious tones. You know, again and again, when the child understands, he is, so every year when you open your class, especially I said from class 5 onwards, please do tell them the structure of the poetry, the kind, because we straight away move on to, you know, we relate the topic and move on, and then in between we say, okay, this is a metaphor, this is a simile. But I would just love, when I was young, I still remember my teacher took special classes in taking that time out in teaching us the toolkit. The toolkit of poetry is very important. So every year, a strong recommendation, every year, please, Joe. So poetry aims to empowering your students to tackle challenging texts, because poetry is not simple. Teaching students reading strategies to understand poetry. Thinking about world and life issues. Yes, poetry is, yes, Monica. Uh, Thinking about world and life issues is very important. Uh, okay. And, you know, poetry is normally an expression of emotions. And so it becomes extremely important that it has to be taught in a very expressive way. The child needs to connect with the poetry. And as I've already mentioned, please, you know, uh, enrich your students and empower your students with the toolkit. And now I had this beautiful voiceover of daffodils. I really don't know if Monica, can we play this poem to the
Yes.
audience, or?
Yes, ma'am, we can play.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you. So I always encourage that please bring such new things in your class, even if it is there in the book. I would recommend that bring voiceovers in the class. Ask the students to record. Yes, please, Ankesh.
Ma'am, do you want me to play only the voice or the entire thing, please?
You can play because that's just the picture. If you could play the entire thing, that will be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll share the screen now.
Yes, please.
Just
bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the death. I wandered lonely as a cloud by William Wordsworth. I wandered lonely as a cloud. That floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of the bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. For oft, when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils.
Yes, ma'am. You can share your screen now.
So similarly, it's very important. So one of your classes or one or two of your classes should go in just reading in the right diction. And then it's very important for the teacher to help students understand the structure of the poem. So from the poetic form to stanza analysis to poetic structure, personal commentary, because it's very, once you're done, once you've dwelt in the child the flair, the passion to read poetry, that's very important. Otherwise your classes will get assassinated if you straight away take, because poetry is tough. Poetry is finding meanings, trying to read in between lines. Poetry is all about, expression, and children are too young, but if they understand, if the right way of, so let us look at some of the traditional ways to teach poetry were, which I was told when I was a teacher by my experts: get the student to discuss something thematically related to the poem to be studied. Introduce the poem in some problematized form, sometimes a line at a time, sometimes with certain words redacted, sometimes just the title, and so on. Provide students with prompts about poem to help shape their ability to discuss their first responses. Read the poem in its entirety. Briefly explain any unfamiliar vocabulary and answer any questions. Get students to develop some sort of creative response. Whereas the effective and innovative things would be just introduce the way, even if you don't understand at times music, You just enjoy. There are times when you hear music of a language which you don't even know, but still you enjoy. That's what poetry is. The poetry has to be enjoyed, lived, and felt. Draw on your students' real life experiences. Expose the students to great poetry. Encourage free writing. Pick a theme for the lesson. Celebrate students' work and ask them to enjoy. Coming to some of the newer and innovative techniques, which I think, mentioned when we began, was choose challenging texts right from the beginning. Ideally, the way we teach poetry should be thought of as a sequence where each new poem builds on and is viewed in a relationship to every other. But don't think that these are difficult poems. You have to just teach them with a lot of heart, with a lot of expression, and most importantly, the toolkit. Provide them with the toolkit. That is very important. They don't know how to interpret, how to understand poetry, but once they have the toolkit, they have the explanations of alliteration, what is a metaphor, what is personification, what are similes, what are stanzas. Once you have told them, I think the task becomes extremely easy. As always, tell stories. This brings the poem and its context vividly to life and allows the student to consider it from great range of angles. Make them speak. Let them express themselves and let them come out with a creative explanation. It's not necessary the explanation which the text provides is the right explanation. There can be an interpretation. There can be a newer perspective. Please encourage creativity in students. Make them speak. Whatever else it is, poetry is communication. Once children have got some interpretation to consider, they can start shaping their personal responses. That's what I'm saying. Do not curb them. Listen to them. Listen to their interpretation. Listen, because it is a paradigm shift of times. They might be interpreting it in a completely different way. Accept it. Practice recalling poetic knowledge. Learning a poem by heart is wonderfully enriching and allows poem to live and breathe inside you. You have to live poetry. You cannot just read it as a simple text. And lastly, avoid pointless writing. I know our curriculum, our exam structure does not, permit us, but avoid asking them to write the explanation of each and every line. When you're teaching, let them live poetry. Maybe later on, you can issue, even if later you issue them a white paper about poetry's explanation, I would recommend that. Because normally what happens in the class is the teacher is reading and she is explaining line by line. And she's encouraging, the students are only writing the lines explanation, the meanings of the words. Please don't do that. Instead, send them a sheet in which there are this kind of explanations. Just send them. There is no harm. Try this out. There is no harm. Just discuss poetry with them, read with them, and later on probably you can send them a detailed interpretation for the heck of your exam writing. Because it's normally the students don't understand. They have to write. As it is, the text, it's new to them. The language is a little new to them. And they get lost in that we must write immediately what the teacher is saying. So my tip is that please send them a written note, but at the time when you're teaching poetry, please be as creative, as innovative as you can. So yes, there was, but I think time is running out. Monica, are we running out of time? So I would, this is another activity which was supposed to, but I think we don't have enough time. We wasted quite a lot because of the internet issues. But yes, that's the way. When you're doing, tell them, while you read, just tell them these are the stanzas, the line, the rhythm, the alliteration, side by side. But let this be the second or the third reading. In the first reading, let them enjoy. Take an audio to the class. And even if it means record your voice on the phone, because teachers, as teachers, you can recite the poems very beautifully. Or if you want, YouTube is full. And these days, when you're doing online teaching, it's recommended make extensive use of the YouTube facilities and the content, which is the digital content. This was just something which you already know, but I just thought, let me create this. You can take a screenshot of this. Okay, last but not least, encourage creative thinking in children. In language is all about creative thinking. Get the children to use their senses. Let them hear. Let them speak. You can take maybe an object or an idea or anything new to the class each time you enter. And believe me, your class will not be boring, even if you're speaking things which are already there in your text. Be as expressive. Your language teachers, you need to be. Encourage them to get ideas from the world around them. Get them right about what they know and love. A small tip that I would recommend to all the English teachers is, please do a lot of reflection in your class. For everything, do reflection. Let them write whatever they want to. It's very creative to do reflections. Let them do a reflection. Don't threaten them. Don't make them a test. Don't use the words when you're teaching assessments and evaluation and tests. Let them say, you write. And please introduce your classes as I used to always do, because again, there are no wrong answers. There are never wrong answers. There are some perspectives. So children will always be very encouraged. The moment, don't use the term, this is wrong, no. Say, these are perspectives. And my perspective is this. And you being a teacher, they will definitely pick up, want to take your perspective. So please don't criticize. Please don't say that these are difficult words. Please don't say that let's read this poem and read the poem in one go. Make your classes as interesting as you can. It's nothing new as what has been, discussed in the session today. For some, it may not be anything new. For some, yes, it would be. But the only purpose for us was to make you understand that how in virtual times you need to connect with your students. And language, I always recommend, is a very important aspect is for the teachers to create a bond. Just imagine, nobody taught you your mother tongue. So with this, we come to the end of the workshop. If you could please log on to the given site and given link and spare a few minutes to share your suggestions. Meanwhile, we would love to take the Q&A round. If you have any questions, please feel free.
So you can
Devyani ma'am,
Yes.
you can see the chats.
Yes.
Everyone is posting the questions over there.
Yes, I will take it up. Um, Many children just do not write. Ina writes, many children just do not write. They have ideas, they talk, but they do not write. What kind of activities or ideas can be used to help them? Great question, Nina. That is bang on. Yes, children shirk writing. I would recommend that start with a very small assignment, something where they can just do a one-liner or a phrase. They don't write because they feel they are very scared of, because languages usually demand lot of content, but encourage them to even write in phrases, and maybe one markers introduced, because if they are elementary school class students, it is fine if you develop some worksheets in which you can just have one liners, phrases. Just don't be in a hurry for them to write big chunk answers, right? I hope I have made myself clear. Also encourage, maybe you can reduce your writing, weightage of writing less, and use multiple windows for assessment. So it is fine if you encourage them to write, to take their responses. Any resource for sensory details? Yes, when you talk about sensory details, it is basically when you're using your listening skills, then encourage a lot of hearing, bring on to the audio aids. That is a very, then maybe you could just have picture display. These are sensory details that you have displayed the picture, and the child is looking at the picture and doing picture compositions are those sensory details. Use a lot of alternatives, because today's child is very smart, and today's children want more, something more on the platter. So it is recommended that every time as an educator, just tweak your class and try and use different methods each time. Sometimes you can take an audio, sometimes you can probably, if it had been, it's an elementary class, and if you were introducing some kind of a text, you could probably take some objects which they could touch, and they could children are very sensitive, and they really appreciate. Oh yeah, for grade 1, yes, again, rhymes are very important. For grade 1, playway techniques in terms of, as I told you, if you want the child to they really enjoy this puzzle aspect, when you, instead of making them ask that, may I come in, ma'am? So you just, for 1 week, choose 2-3 vocabulary words, and they love this, and relate those words with different instructions that you want. Maybe it is lunchtime, so lunchtime is over, you can use a word for this, bell, or may I come in. The class password is a very effective technique, and encourage them. And obviously the sad thing is, these days, because we are teaching online, and the children are glued, and even if they are watching too much of videos, so I would recommend send them lots of audios instead of videos, and encourage them at home to do some activities, and ask the parents to convert that activity in a rhyme and record and send it back. So even if they are doing some activity, they can, convert it into a small rhyme, like cleaning the house, or something that. Thank you so much. I think I'm just looking at.
Ma'am, I can see some hand raised also. If you want, I can unmute them for them to ask questions.
Yes, please.
So I can see the first hand of Sri Lekha. I'm unmuting you, ma'am.
Yes.
I can't see the mic option there. So I can see, okay. Just I can see the hand of Pravati. So I'm unmuting. Yeah, please.
Yes, Pravati.
I think she is not there. Okay, I'm unmuting Abhiraj.
Yes.
Just a minute, huh? I can't see.
Hello.
Yeah,
Hello.
Abhiraj. Yeah, Abhiraj, I can hear you. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Yes. Yeah. Ma'am, I was wanting to ask you, I mean, at this stage when I have seen that maximum of the children are very much prone to explore the aspects of science. So I have seen that somewhere student version to acquire knowledge in English is reducing. Ma'am?
Your voice is breaking. Can you come again?
Yeah.
Or could you please?
Yeah, ma'am, I was willing to. Yeah, I was willing to ask you, ma'am, that at this stage when students are very much curious to explore the realms of science and mathematics, so how can we make English teaching equivalent to the level of science?
That's a well, I would say that Aviraj, there is absolutely no comparison between, because it's only when you understand your language,
yes,
you can excel in other subjects. Language, because initially also I told you that the purpose, the aim of teaching English is one of the main aims of teaching English is mastery, understanding to interpret and understand other subjects. So unless they do not, but what you're saying is a reality. What happens is that parents and children are, their focus area is maths and science, and sad part is they neglect language. But they need to realize that, so you need to emphasize a lot of communication. The moment child learns to communicate, there is a lot of confidence in the child, and he starts understanding. And I'm sure, so your English classes, you need to make them very, very, interesting. And you need to every day you need to take something where the child feels connected and he has that wow moment and he looks forward to your class. And once he understands, he will be able to, importance of English. Yes.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Devyani ma'am, I'm unmuting Miss Shyamla. She wants to interact with you.
All right.
Shyamla ma'am, you can ask your question now.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Yeah, nice meeting you, Ms. Devyani, ma'am. And my question is regarding Prose text, madam. Actually, we go in a process of skimming and scanning. So here, I face the difficulty, like children are having difficulty in extracting implications of the writer from a specific text. So could you please give some tips how to make ready them?
Yes, that is what I said in my presentation as well. Implications of the writer, because when you're discussing, first is that you need to relate when you're introducing the text, prose to the child. It becomes extremely important to relate the text with similar stories, then go on to explaining indirectly about the intent of the writer, the plot of the story. If you set that plot, there is no harm, because you might need to, because they're children, you might need to, once or twice, lead them to this kind of activity, and later on they will start getting connected with the writing styles of the writers and authors, and they will be able to identify the genre of a particular text. So this is which class students are you talking about?
This is for IGCSE, madam. IGCSE stage 6 to 8.
Yes, because yes, that is what, because 6 to 8 they've been initially exposed to stories till class 5, which may be motivational. Later, the implications, what the writer is trying to say, you have to build in that plot, build them similar when you are doing introducing the text to the child. You need to relate, you need to have that guided conversation with the child, which relates to the plot or relates to the genre of that particular text.
The kind of genre we are going to introduce, ma'am, right?
Yes, that's very important, because they are children at the end of the day. And there are times when because we know this is like, this is the genre, but then when they are exposed to it, they actually get confused. So when you're building that tone in your introductory lesson, you kind of create that structure with them.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. That's really great and informative. And ma'am, could you help me to how to enrich vocabulary in students, because they are having when they are trying to extract these implications with the keywords or core expressions, actually they are getting paused with some words.
Yes, vocabulary is very essential, because when you're doing the main techniques to enhance the vocabulary is to encourage them to indulge in non-evaluative reading. That is very important. Evaluative reading becomes very important. So encourage them to, because if you ask them to read a newspaper, it actually becomes, nobody does it. I mean, when we were young, if we were asked to read the newspaper, so as a teacher, English teacher, it becomes important for you to expose them to good, maybe films, expose them to good reading material, because picking up vocabulary, there is no other way. You cannot cram. That's a very old school of thought. So take some excerpts like this one, Becoming, which I introduced, and I'm sure every child would be very fascinated, because what happens is when you take something which is not there in the text. So,
Devyani ma'am, can we briefly take up a couple of more queries?
All right.
I'm unmuting Darshana ma'am. Darshana ma'am, please ask a query.
Yeah, ma'am, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, actually my doubt is, we are from the rural, that is Bagalkot, up country. So few children come from totally local background where the parents are unable to speak English or read English. So how do we improve those children?
Again, the answer, Darshana ma'am, would be same, that because they are not just first generation, second language, understand, they are first generation into education. So it's very difficult for them. But one thing you need to ensure is, as a school also, you need to encourage spoken English. And because that's very important. You have to create an environment of spoken English. Only then the writing aspect will, take care of itself.
Yes, yes.
Otherwise, it will only be cramming. So that's
Yeah, yeah.
next question.
Devyani ma'am, one last query from Swapna Manoj ma'am. I'm unmuting her right now. She can ask her question.
Tell me.
Hello.
Hello, ma'am. Yeah.
Hello. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
I'm Swapna from Kerala.
Yes.
And my doubt is that if there is anything wrong, if you use mother tongue in between to make this student clear the content.
If it is used, because this is a very, very debatable, honestly, this has been a great debate, greatly debated to use bilingual in a class, because if there is one theory which says that nobody taught you your mother tongue, you picked up your mother tongue yourself. And even if, yes, there are ways. I was taking a workshop a few days back, and they said that, to teach children in English, you're recommended, at home, you're recommended to label the thing in English, for example, salt, fridge, or something. But maybe once or twice, but do not encourage it, because the child gets dependent, and the child is, the brain is so intelligent that the child will swim up. So just maybe you could interpret the term, but do not do two language teaching in an English class. They will swim up. No, they will. Use small, easy sentences, but not very, high, difficult or heavy words. Use simple, small words which they can understand. But do not, try and refrain from double language. Yes. Monica, any other?
Ankesh?
No, ma'am, that's it. I think we can call it a day. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you all the participants for joining in. Please share your feedback. This will help us in improving such sessions and also bring you much more engaging sessions like this. Thank you. Be safe. Good night.
Thank you very much. Thank you.